Hi again. This shouldn't take too long to go through chapter 1 and 2. The only thing I wanted to tell you about chapter 1 is, hopefully you can see this, there's this overview on page 6 and 7. It can be really helpful when you're studying or trying to figure out the differences between um, theories because it's kind of the overview. So if you're confused between cognitive and cognitive behavioral, those kinds of things, then it might help you kind of give a differential diagnosis, so to speak. Um, Nothing else on chapter 1 is really going to be on a test, so I'm not too concerned about that. For chapter 2, it's interesting information that might help you a little bit. On page 19, there's a lot of stuff that talks about personal characteristics for effective counselors. I want to point out to you that it's telling you that effective therapists have an identity, and I feel like the book kind of makes that sound like you're supposed to have it all figured out. That's not for right now. Eventually you may, but we never have it all figured out because as soon as we think there is, there's a new challenge. So I want you to keep in mind that this idea that you know who you are and what you're capable of becoming and what you want out of life, you just have to feel like you're progressing, or at least maybe feeling like you have a sense of who you want to be. It's not so much about being perfect because I think we're always growing and we're always changing and we always have different challenges. So don't let that part of this book make you think, oh no, I can't be a good social worker, because you can. A lot of strength comes out of adversity and out of challenges, and we've all had different kinds of adversity and challenges. That's what makes us who we are. So don't get caught up on that. I do like the idea that therapists learn to respect and appreciate themselves. I think that's part of setting up good boundaries. You don't want clients taking advantage of you, and you don't want agencies taking advantages of you. But at the same time, you want to role model how to do that in a positive way and not in a negative way. So, you don't want to be screaming at people, you don't want to be rude to them, but you also don't want to work 80 hours a week if you're working a 40-hour-a-week job. If that happens, which does a lot in social work, then what ends up happening is they're never hiring the second social worker that they actually need because they're getting you to do all the work. So keep that in mind. Um, Social workers are authentic, sincere, and honest. We don't lie to our clients. Our integrity is paramount. So, what we do is we use those listening and communication skills to talk to people in a way that they can understand it and um, use a strengths perspective so that when you're talking about their challenges, it it's a growth moment and not something that comes out negative and that they end up feeling like they can't trust you or something like that. Um, Social workers do make mistakes and you have to be willing to admit them. Um, that's part of life. That's part of being good at any job is to admit when you make the mistake and fix it if you can. And if you can't, then what do you need to do next to be effective? Um, let's see. Um, Interest in the welfare of others. Obviously, when you're becoming a social worker and you're doing therapy, it's about the clients getting better and achieving the goals that they want to achieve, not what other people always think. The only limit to that is where it's court ordered or they're adjudicated, they're in prison or something like that, where sometimes it's about achieving what society wants them to achieve, not just about what they're motivated to achieve. Um, let's see. So as we keep on going, personal therapy for the counselor. If you have some issues that are bothering you, or often they start to bother you as you're working in an agency or you're working in your internship, practice what you preach. Go out and get yourself a good therapist. work through whatever's bothering you so that it won't haunt you in your future, both personally and professionally. Um, the role of values on page 22 it starts. So what I'm going to say about that is the book really talks about values and position. As social workers, one of the things that we don't do is push our values on other people. So we have to start where the clients are. We may not agree with everything that they express and value, um, but we do respect their right to it, and we start looking maybe for what got them there and is it a chance for them to grow more. So that sort of thing. Um, the other side of that is that we have to be aware of our own values. How do they cause biases? How do we handle that? So that is where transference and countertransference happens. Transference is when the client is identifying with you for a different reason. You may remind them of somebody, they may think that you've been in the same situation, that kind of thing. So that's transference. Countertransference is when we're emotionally responding to the client. So they remind us of somebody, or the situation that they're talking about reminds us of something that we've been through. So that way, what we have to be careful of is that we're still giving them good therapy, that we're not influenced by what would be best for us as opposed to what's best for them. So the book talks a lot about becoming a multicultural counselor. Um, we can never know everything about a certain culture. That's just impossible because it's always evolving. Just like we're growing, cultures change and evolve too. So the important thing is to always ask your client about the culture and let them talk about it so you kind of know where their mindset comes from. What's their perspective on it? Um, Strengths, challenges, the whole thing of what does this mean to them to be from a particular culture, be a particular gender, um, ethnicity, race, anything that's diversity related. How do they deal with this? Because the best way to work with them is to understand where they are as an individual. So you can't ignore culture. Um, don't avoid asking the tough questions. And when you don't know or you don't understand, you can ask them for clarity. But it's also your job as a professional to go and find yourself some more education about it. For example, I had a client one time who was from the Middle East, and he and his wife had ran away and moved over to Texas. And he was talking about that his wife's family might come and kill her, and that's what he was worried about. And I wasn't sure, was the guy paranoid or was this a sincere threat? So I found somebody who was from the same culture and was a professional, and I talked to them about the case, and they informed me, yes, that would be considered an honor killing, that it's very possible that the wife's family may uh, find somebody to come over to the United States and kill her, and that would be considered acceptable in their culture because she had dishonored the family by running away. Well, I would have had no idea. I couldn't find anything about it online at the time. If I hadn't found the right professional with some cultural expertise. So don't be afraid to go find that stuff. Always go find what you can. And hopefully, if you're doing this right, you keep on learning. So I keep learning new things every time I work with new clients. That's one of the things that makes it not boring, makes it exciting for me. So hopefully you'll find that same excitement. Let's see what else. So on page 28, we start talking about the issues that are faced by a beginning therapist. The first one is anxiety. Yes, it's anxiety producing. Whether it's the first day that you walk into the internship or the first day that you walk into that official job after you've gotten the degree. It's anxiety provoking. Here we are, we have all this information, and all of a sudden you've got this diploma, and suddenly you're, oh, I'm supposed to be a professional. Okay, keep in mind, partialize. That doesn't mean that you have to know everything. It means you either know some of it or you know where to go find out about it. If there's one thing you got good at after school, it's research, right? So again, use your education wherever you need to. I always recommend that you use your continuing education units that you have to have for your licensure as a place where you can always find some more information about the things that seem like they're coming up right then that you need to know more about. Um, but keep in mind, it's normal to be anxious on the first day of a new job, or the first week, or the first month, or the first time you have to do a group by yourself. All those things are normal. So keep that in mind, that when that happens to you, um, you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing. Um, Being yourself and self-disclosure. You do want to be yourself. Clients recognize genuineness and authenticity, and they appreciate that. They want to know that you're not faking them out and pretending to be somebody else. Self-disclosure, be kind of careful with. It's nice to give them some things, but you don't want to give them so much that you're coloring their therapy again. For instance, in my office, I have, I have my diplomas and stuff, obviously, but I have one big picture of a lake. It's a picture that I took of a lake in the mountains in Norway on vacation a few years back, that's blown up. But it doesn't say anything. It doesn't say, oh, I was there, or anything like that. So unless somebody asks me, I don't tell them. It's just a nice picture that they can look at. I don't have any pictures of my kids. I don't want people thinking, oh, she only has boys, so she doesn't understand girls, or oh, she's a mother, so she won't understand what it's like to be a father, or she won't understand what it's like that I don't want kids. So by not providing that information, I'm not coloring what their perspective. If they ask me, then I'll give them some short answers. Yes, I have 3 boys, they're grown, that kind of stuff. Um, but I don't delve into it, because that's not what that time is for. The time is to be working on what they need to work on. At times, it may be appropriate to do a little bit of self-disclosure, but again, always make sure that it's about them and helping them, that it never gets into being about you. You don't want them focusing on you. You want them focusing on themselves. Um, don't expect to be perfect. Nobody is. One of the best things that one of my professors told me when I was in graduate school is clients are patient. So if you don't understand it or you don't get it as the therapist the first time, they'll keep on telling you until you get it. So just keep on listening. But that also means you don't have to panic and worry about, oh no, if I didn't get it all. What you get in the intake, yes, you want a good psychosocial history, but there's going to be some things that maybe they aren't ready to tell you that first session. And that's okay. That might be good boundaries. There might be things that they forgot, or they didn't understand, or anything like that, or it doesn't come up till you're in the 3rd session. That's fine. It's an evolution, so it's always growing, it's always moving. So there isn't such thing as perfection within the therapy room. Be honest about your limitations. Besides being good for therapies, uh, it's also a legal thing of always practicing within your scope. So if somebody asks you if you are certified in EMDR, don't tell them yes unless you are. That would be misrepresenting yourself. And again, they need that honesty. Not only do they need it to be able to trust you, but they need it to be role modeled for them of how you talk and how you tell people the truth. So keep that in mind always. There's things called therapeutic silences. It's where the room gets quiet and nobody says anything. Most people, lay people, so people who are not professionals, will get anxious when there's silence there. you can use that silence. If you stay silent, then a lot of times they'll open up and tell you something. So don't be afraid of letting the room be quiet for a few minutes. Caveat to that, adolescents are notorious for um, playing the waiting game and playing the silent game. So if you stay silent, they'll stay silent, and they'll just purposely stay silent to see what you do with it. So don't try and beat them out of being silent. The best thing to do is kind of what I call come in from the sides. So if they don't want to be in therapy, and somewhere in here, it's the next thing anyway, dealing with lack of commitment. If somebody doesn't want to be in therapy, as opposed to trying to convince them that therapy is good or telling them, well, you have to do it because you're here, try going in sideways in the, oh, so what makes you resistant? Or, well, how are you ending up in here if you don't, actually, I don't like that. Let me replace that. Because I wouldn't say what makes you resistant. I would say what makes you not like the idea of therapy. Or, well, if you don't want to be in therapy, how do you end up in my office? What's going on? And so they're saying, oh, this stupid judge made me do that. Oh, okay. Are there other things that seem unjust in your life besides this judge? And all of a sudden, I've given them the opportunity to tell me everything they feel is unjust in their life. So, those kind of questions. You'll notice, even when I'm doing this lecture for you, I had to correct myself. It takes time to learn how to do that. It gets to be a natural thing to do, and every once in a while, you get a case that just you struggle. And that's just part of it. So, again, not expecting perfection and understanding that sometimes people are going to be motivated for different reasons. Um, so, we can talk some more about that as we go through class if y'all want. Dealing with demands from clients. The other side of the not motivated one is sometimes you'll get very demanding clients. They expect you to be their best friend. You're not their best friend. You are a professional social worker. So sometimes they will be upset. But I thought you cared about me. I do care about you, but I cannot hold your hand all day. I'm a professional. That kind of thing of where's that difference of what you're going to tell them. I vividly remember being in New Orleans at Masters and Johnson, and I had a borderline teenager that I was working with, and she screamed at me through the room, I thought you were my friend. And I answered, I'm your social worker. I'm not your friend. I'm a professional. And she was furious, but it was something that she had to hear. So it's not something ever said rudely. It's not something said to hurt them, but you do need that boundary there of, I'm not your friend. No dual relationships, which is something we'll talk about next week with the Code of Ethics. Tolerating ambiguity. Some days they walk in and it's a great session. Some days they walk in and it's a horrible session. You never know what it's going to be until they walk in. So you have to tolerate that ambiguity. The other place that you deal with a lot of ambiguity is that you don't know what's going to happen in the end. You don't know if they're going to continue therapy and it's going to get better for them, or if they're going to end up leaving therapy in a place where you feel like, oh gee, I'm not sure that they're going to make it. All you can do at that point is realize that you've helped build a foundation. So the minutes that they spoke to you is a part of building that foundation, that even if they weren't able to do everything, hopefully they'll end up being able to build on it with somebody else, if not with you. That's all you can do. And those few minutes of being with somebody that they can trust and being heard may be the pivotal point. So don't sell yourself short. But you do have to tolerate that, because a lot of people quit therapy midstream or come to 1 or 2 sessions and leave after that, and you don't even feel like they're in the middle of the stream yet, right? That's the way it is. Developing a sense of humor is a good thing. Uh, sometimes there's a laugh or cry response, right? Sometimes it's okay to laugh. I had a client once who was talking about that his significant other would go into the closet late at night and cry instead of waking him up in bed every night. And one of the things that I pointed out to him that was kind of humorous at the time was, um, so your significant other came out of the closet only to put himself back into the closet? Well, we thought it was hilarious at the time. Um, Laughing about things is a coping mechanism. So don't be afraid to use that sometimes, but don't avoid the tears either. So again, let the client go where the client needs to go. If they need to cry, let them cry. If they need to laugh, laugh with them. Um, you know, whatever other emotions are there. There's such a big range of what you're going to see. Um, just kind of go with it. And again, let the client lead. If there's one thing you're going to hear this whole thing, it's let the client lead, right? Um, Along with that, sharing that responsibility with the client. You'll see as we go through these group projects, some of the theories have the therapist creating the goals and kind of creating the homework, and other theories have the client creating their own goals and creating their own things that they're going to do. Both ways are correct, but in social work, we really stress that the client is self-determination and that kind of stuff, and empowering the client. So part of the ways that we can empower them is to give them the responsibility of working on their own goals, and we can check in and see how they're doing, and give them feedback and help them process it, but not do the work for them all the time. That's very important, and sometimes that's hard to learn because sometimes they expect you to, and it's like, no, we're going to give you the tools so you can do it yourself. That gives them so much more self-confidence when they complete it than if you did it for them. Page 32, declining to give advice. We do not give advice. That is a legal and an ethical issue. We can't tell somebody what we think they should do. We can discuss with them and process, what do you think your options are? Well, what do you think would happen with this option? Well, what do you think would happen if you did this? We can do that kind of thing, but we can't tell them which one to do. They have to make their own decision. Sometimes that will frustrate clients. You just have to kind of, again, give them that idea. You know what? You're thinking about this. It's going to come to you. You need to do the one that is the best in your estimation, not what's best for me. And so you kind of reframe and give it back to them of, this is something they're capable of doing. Um, Learning your role and using these techniques appropriately is something that you are constantly learning and evolving to do. I'm not the same therapist that I was when I was fresh out of school. I'm not the same therapist that I was 10 years ago. I'm not even the same therapist I was 3 years ago. Um, we keep on growing, and hopefully that's something that you'll do too. You don't want to be that burnt out social worker that stops growing. You don't want to be that social worker that's stuck in 1960 and everybody else is struggling to move along. You want to be the one that keeps up to date. It's exciting to keep up to date. It's more interesting. You can learn new things constantly, and it's not just about social work. It's all sorts of stuff that's neat to know. So, enjoy it. It's a lot better when you don't have to write a paper over it, I'll tell you that. Um, Developing your own counseling style, again, that's going to be evolving forever. Right now, you're going to be learning what your field instructor does. Maybe you learn from some videos you watch. You learn from mock role plays. If you've ever seen one of the professors act out how they would do it, then, there's different places you learn. Well, you take all that and you kind of, my suggestion is you treat it like a buffet. You try a little bit of it, you figure out what works for you. The things that don't work, you kind of throw to the edge of your plate. And maybe later on you learn to like Brussels sprouts, but right now you don't. So maybe that theory that tastes like Brussels sprouts to you is just not a theory that you're going to buy into at this moment. That's okay. Unless the agency is demanding that you use the Brussels sprout theory, you don't have to use it. So use the broccoli one instead. Um, like I said, maybe later on you'll do that. So that is the end of chapter 2. We'll do chapter 3 and the code of ethics next week. Take care of yourself. Have a great week.